the importance of pollinators. This is my audience. So does anybody like blueberries?
Yes.
How about strawberries or raspberries?
Yeah.
How about bananas, grapes, mangoes?
Love them all.
Avocados? Well, all of these things and many others rely on pollinators. In fact, 1 in 3 bites of food rely on pollinators. So I want to explain what pollination is, who the pollinators are, and how you can attract them into your own garden. The first thing I'm going to explain is what pollination is. Basically, it's just the transfer of pollen from the male part of the flower to the female part of the flower. Now, if it's a perfect flower, they have both parts and they pollinate themselves. But if they're imperfect, they have male parts over here and female parts over here. These could be separate flowers. They could also be on separate plants. They could even be a half mile away from each other. And this is where the pollinators come in because they're the ones that are going to transfer the pollen from one to the other. Now, why is this important? Because the fertilized flowers are what become fruits, vegetables, and seeds, which is important to everybody. So what exactly is a pollinator? It's basically anything that visits a flower and then picks up a little bit of pollen and then moves it to another flower. That's a pollinator. It can be a bee, a fly, a beetle, a wasp, a butterfly, or a moth. It could even be a small lizard or a small mammal. Bats and birds are very important pollinators. They're the main pollinators of coconuts and bananas. And according to pollinator.org, 200,000 species of pollinators are critical to the stability of our food supplies. So bees are the #1 pollinator. I want to introduce first a couple of the native bees to Pennsylvania. One I think that you're going to recognize is the bumblebee, which are these fat, fuzzy guys. They actually are built for pollinating. You might hear them actually make a buzzing sound when they're flying through the air. They have pollen baskets built into their hind legs where you can see gobs of pollen. This is actually so that they can carry the pollen back to the babies in the nest. But they also do a lot of pollinating on the way. Many tomatoes are actually grown commercially in hothouses, and they use bumblebees in those hothouses to pollinate the tomatoes. There are also some very small bees that are native to Pennsylvania. One of these is a sweat bee. They are very small, about the size of a Tic Tac, maybe a little bit longer. They can be metallic green with shades of blue or copper. And you'll recognize them because in the summer, if you're out working up a sweat, they will actually come and land on you and lick up some of your sweat. There are other small bees that are native as well, and we really just call them small dark bees. They could be carpenters, masons, mining bees, all kinds of different ones. But they're about the size of a piece of rice. And the way you're going to recognize them is basically because they're going to be on a flower, drinking nectar, and then we'll have some pollen attached to their little tiny bodies. The next one I want to talk to you about is the European honeybee, which I think made a little bit of an early appearance. These guys they live in man-made hives. There could be close to 100,000 bees in a hive. They're very important pollinators. Truckloads with millions of honeybees travel around the country during the seasons. They go to New York for apples, they go to Maine for blueberries, Massachusetts for cranberries, Georgia for peaches, they go to Florida for watermelons. But the main event is in the spring, each year, billions and billions of honeybees, along with other pollinators as well, go to California to pollinate the almonds. In total, there's probably at least 80 billion pollinators it takes to pollinate the almonds. So according to Bee Culture magazine, about 90 commercially grown crops rely on bee pollination for survival. Last thing I want to do is give you some tips for how to attract pollinators. First of all, no pesticides. When it comes to a garden, size doesn't really matter. I mean, you could have a ½ acre or you could have just a little sunny spot on your patio with a grouping of pots. The best plants for native bees are native plants. You can get a list easily just by Googling PA native plants. Also trees, shrubs, anything like that in your landscape that blooms or has flowers on it, they're also going to be a source of nectar and pollen for your pollinators. So when it comes to flowers, you really just want to have a nice variety of different shapes, sizes, and colors. Simple tip when you go to your garden center, what to look for is just simply some shapes. You could look for a disc-shaped flower, which is going to be a wide, flat type of flower, kind of like a daisy. This is a zinnia. This is a really good shape for butterflies because they have this nice, big, flat landing pad. They kind of like to hang out when they're drinking nectar. So they're great for butterflies. Butterflies like red, orange, yellow, pink, and purple flowers. The next shape is a trumpet shape. And this one is long, narrow, tubular, and the nectar is going to be way down here in the bottom. So most of your fat pollinators aren't going to be able to get in there to get to the nectar, which means there's going to be lots of it stored in there for when hummingbirds come along. They love this kind of flower, and hummingbirds love red. And then we also have an umbrella-shaped flower. This is made up of hundreds of little tiny flowers, and these are great because lots of pollinators can land on here and be enjoying their own little flower full of nectar. 10 of them could be on there at the same time. And then we have one that is bell-shaped. So these, when a bee comes and lands in here, to get the nectar, it's actually going to go like all the way in there, and so it's going to get really covered in pollen. Bell-shaped flowers, you can get big ones, small ones. A lot of herbs have really little bell-shaped flowers. Herbs are great for pollinators. They love them. They have also some umbrella-shaped flowers on your herbs. And that is the last tip, except for bees especially like purple flowers, blue flowers, violet flowers, and they basically like every shape you could give them. So I think now you know what pollination is. You should know who the pollinators are and be able to recognize some of them. And I hope you understand why they're so important. So with the tips that I gave you, I hope that you'll have a little pollinator-friendly garden of your own. And I think the pollinators would appreciate it. Thank you.